Red Bull has engaged in some development wars with Mercedes, as the Austrian team now feels like the legality of the front wing of the W15 is definitely something that needs to be questioned furthermore by the FIA. The step that Mercedes made in Montreal was huge, and the fact that they grabbed a podium and a pole position in a season in which they didn't seem to finish higher than 6th, judging by the first couple of races, has raised Red Bull's awareness to a greater level. But is this something that will be further looked at by the FIA, and could Mercedes be back on track in 2024? It goes without saying that Mercedes is a team that made a large step in the past couple of races. However, when a situation like this occurs, oftentimes teams from the paddock are raising questions about the legality of some of the new parts that have been introduced on the car. In this particular case, it's the front wing of the W15, or more precisely, the flexibility, something that has been quite controversial ever since the introduction in the first race. But with Mercedes having had to work on the car's design in a bit more of a precise manner, and still being uncompetitive at the beginning of the season, it was not as big of a problem for Red Bull. Now that Verstappen had to fight Russell on a much closer manner, and with Perez being way out of the picture in the last 3 races, Red Bull might have looked deeper into the front wing of Mercedes, and they believe that there's something that's making this part illegal, which is the flexibility. Although the front wing passed the static check from the FIA, which means that it was deemed legal by the governing body, further checks can be applied if a team submits a request to the FIA. In this case, the engineers under the supervision of Paul Monaghan will examine the new front wing of the car. It is quite interesting because all of this comes at a controversial time where Mercedes is very confident about the understanding of the car and is expected to be fighting at the front in a much more frequent manner. The first change was applied to Russell's car only in Monaco. However, due to the nature of the circuit, it was not able to be exercised to its full potential, and in Montreal we've seen that Mercedes had arguably the fastest car on the grid, but they weren't able to capitalise on it properly. A loophole that Red Bull is now looking deeper into is the fact that teams are able to activate the process of flexing of the front wing at a certain load range during the lap, and a lot of F1 experts agreed that under the new specification of the W15, the front wing flexes a bit more during these load ranges compared to other challengers. But then again, Mercedes has labelled this as an issue because they were also unable to gather proper information from the car in terms of where they are losing a lot of time and then translate it to the simulator, one of the primary contributors to the correlation issues that the team has suffered from for quite a while. Many have raised questions as to whether this request from Red Bull, which is also seemingly made towards McLaren but is yet to be officialised, comes at a time where the competitive edge has been lost, and the win of the race will depend massively on the Verstappen factor whenever they are to win a race in the future. And that makes a lot of sense because Mercedes have also commented about Red Bull taking a step back, and now looking at all the fronts possible in order to try and chip at every bit of advantage they can. When talking about the upgrades to Red Bull and how they impacted the rest of the grid, James Allison went on to say, "I guess as soon as there is a decent range of cornering speeds, the upgrades of Red Bull will be useful again. But it does look as if their upgrade was a downgrade. So, fingers crossed, that would really mess them up. Because if an upgrade is not working, it makes your life hard. The moment you stop trusting your tools, you have to backtrack and you lose loads of time. Time is your biggest friend. Losing it is your worst enemy." If there's a team that knows about losing time on upgrades that are not working, that is definitely Mercedes. And although Red Bull is far, far away from becoming Mercedes with their new upgrade package, cracks of vulnerability have started to show on the RB20's surface, and that has been capitalised on a lot by teams like Ferrari and McLaren. It's still uncertain whether Mercedes can join the fight at the front due to the fact that they have a vast amount of ground to cover, but the latest developments are definitely in a positive trend, and Mercedes will be looking to build on this momentum, so Barcelona will truly show whether their front wing will be put under the radar, or, even worse for them, deemed illegal. While Horner remained cautious about the Mercedes upgrades, he seemed to be unbothered about the race pace that has been presented by the W15. And when talking about the pace in Montreal, as well as addressing Allison's comments about Red Bull bringing downgrades instead of upgrades, the team principal of the Austrian squad said, "Even with our downgrade, we managed to beat their upgrade. It was a rewarding race to win. The last couple of races have been more choppy waters for us, but we've still managed to win 2 out of the last 3 races. We had a pole in Imola, and we managed to match the pole time here with a car where both drivers were feeling its deficiencies. So there's a lot to focus on to see if we can improve it. I think despite having won 6 of the last 9 races, we're going to have to be on top of our game to keep eking out a gap." Technically, Red Bull did not beat Mercedes in Montreal because the Brackley-based squad managed to get out with P3 and P4, along with Hamilton's fastest lap, which means they bagged 28 points, while Red Bull bagged 25 thanks to Verstappen's win only. Of course, this is too little to say that Mercedes will be chipping at Red Bull in the next couple of races, but if something were to happen to Verstappen and they were losing the competitive edge, and all of a sudden Mercedes unlocked a wider performance window for their car, the season would be all up for grabs. The primary issue that Red Bull has right now is Perez. As many experts and fans feel, the fact he is struggling so much with the car is not because he's a bad driver. After all, he finished second in the Drivers' Championship last year, something that couldn't be done in their 2010 and 2013 dominant era by the second driver in the team. The poor performances goes to show that the car has taken quite a step forwards, and as Marco said, it's up to Verstappen to bring race wins and carry the team on his back. If we're to look at the points scored in the last 3 races, when the upgrades arrived in Imola and were further exercised in Monaco and Montreal, we'll be looking at massive struggle for Red Bull. In the last 3 events, Perez managed to score 4 points only in Imola, and out of the 62 points the team has scored in these 3 events, 58 are going on the condo of Max Verstappen. This goes to show that had it not been for his great driving and understanding of the car, it would be quite difficult for Red Bull to keep that competitive edge, something that Helmut Marko has spoken about as well. The paradox is that Perez got a 2-year continuation of his contract right before he went on to get kicked out of the Canadian Grand Prix in Q1 and crash the car with terminal damage, receiving a 3-place grid penalty for Barcelona for driving it to the pits in an unsafe manner. Be that as it may, the situation is quite critical, and instead of looking at the front wings of the other teams, Red Bull should be focusing on bringing a solid driver next to Verstappen in order to secure the Constructors' Championship, because while the drivers' category may be less of a worry for them, the Constructors are definitely going to be lost if the racing continues in this manner. Horner himself called out Perez for his poor performance and said that he needs to be back on track as soon as possible, starting from Barcelona, but also stated that knowing how Perez performs, this isn't something new for him or the team, as the Mexican driver will bounce back stronger than ever. That was visible up until his season due to the fact that the F1 drivers and teams did not have an answer for the dominating machinery that Red Bull had in their hands. But now that there are at least 5 cars that are consistently faster than Perez, he is at risk of finishing 6th in the Drivers' Championship and putting a massive dent in the championship hopes for the Austrian squad. With all of this in mind, do you think that Red Bull questioning the legality of the Mercedes front wing is something that's done with a genuine concern behind it? Or are they looking for all sorts of ways to neutralise the damage from other teams, which is still not looking as great as we can anticipate? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now.